What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Nick 4K video. Today we're checking out a video from Low Quality Tom, and this video is titled Movie Franchises That Never Finished. Let's check it out.
There have been a number of movie franchises that ended in a satisfying way, or at the very least, had a conclusion. But there are also a number of movie franchises that started and never finished their story. So let's discuss what those films are, why they were cancelled, and what the future of that franchise would have been about. Harry Potter is one of the biggest franchises of all time, so it made sense from a financial point of view to expand the universe. But after 3 Fantastic Beasts films, Warner Brothers decided not to carry on with the planned 5 movies. The reason for this is that the financial and critical reception was heading in the wrong direction. So instead of having a crack at a different spin-off, they just went back to readapting something that had already been perfectly adapted. I've read all the Harry Potter books. Well, I listened to all the audiobooks. But either way, I understand there are things in the novel that weren't brought into the movies. Though what I think the films did perfectly was omitting the unnecessary material. I think that's part of the reason why the Fantastic Beasts movies didn't really work for me, because Joe Rowling wrote the screenplays. I feel like writing a novel and writing a script is like driving a car and driving a bus. There are a lot of similarities, but there are also a lot of differences. Just because you can do one doesn't mean you can do the other. If they had written them into novels first, then have someone else write the scripts like Harry Potter, the spin-off franchise could have worked. Now this is a reboot that confuses me the most. You could do so much with the Wizarding World, expanding on the story with different characters. Marvel and Star Wars have had some hiccups, but the spin-offs that work is what keeps those franchises alive. Yeah, Fantastic Beasts might not have worked, but that was just one spin-off idea. They could have thought of something else. Though I guess coming up with new ideas is harder than just doing something that already has all the answers.
Harry Potter, we meet again.
The Divergent novel series is a trilogy.
Okay, so I personally think that the Harry Potter franchise should have ended with the 8th movie. I know there's a lot of people who love the franchise. That's great. I like it, but I don't think we need to really crap on its legacy, considering that a lot of people think that those 8 movies are like perfection. So don't mess with them. I get it. They make money. Just leave them alone. Leave the Wizarding World alone. Go to a different time period that's not close to the characters or anything like that. You know, do like a Knights of the Old Republic, but for Harry Potter, right? So it's a completely different time zone, different time to live, no character connections. Do something else than that type of universe. Do that, but do not don't keep getting close to that legacy. I just think that's like a problem. Don't do that. It's just not good.
The Divergent movie series is also a trilogy. So why am I mentioning this? Well, this franchise was made during a time where it was legally required for the final book to be adapted into 2 movies. However, after the 3rd movie, Allegiant only made $179 million on a budget between $110 and $142, the final part, intended to be titled Ascendant, was cancelled. Plus, the first 2 movies also didn't do great numbers on a financial or critical level. I think they were hoping for Twilight or Hunger Games type money, but instead were unable to crack $300 million worldwide on any of their films. Unlike most 2-part movies that film both at the same time, Ascendant wasn't, so they kinda just didn't bother with it. It's kinda both funny and sad for people who are fans of this franchise that they got so close to wrapping up the Divergent story, but instead were like, nah, it ain't worth it. Despite all this, Lionsgate did intend on making and releasing Ascendant as a TV film, which would then lead into a spin-off TV show with original ideas. But because it was going to be a TV movie instead of theatrically released, the high-profile actors weren't interested in returning. And not long after, the studio thought, maybe no one is interested in this at all, so scrapped the TV movie and TV show.
Come on! You think you can ditch me like this?
Another series that didn't finish adapting or
There was a span of time there for a while, and I think Harry Potter was the first one to really do it, where they split the last book. Harry Potter made sense because of all the stuff that's in the final book. You had to split it in 2, but a lot of other movies started following that same trajectory because they knew they could make more money. So like you mentioned, we saw that with Twilight, The Hunger Games, and a lot of other movie franchises started to try to do that too. But like you mentioned, the issue is that at least when they were doing part 1 and part 2, they filmed them both back to back. So at least part 2 is done. But in this situation, they didn't. Now, I haven't actually watched the Divergent trilogy yet. I heard the first one's pretty alright, and then 2 and 3 are kind of rough. I know I have those on 4K, so one day I'll jump in and check them out. But for right now, especially knowing now that the story doesn't actually complete, I'll take my time getting there.
their books into movies was Percy Jackson. In the original series, there were 5 books, but we only got 2 movies. The Titan's Curse was in development, but was cancelled for a number of factors. One, they weren't doing amazing numbers at the box office, both only just cracking 200 million on a budget of around 90 million each. Secondly, the reviews for both films were mixed. And finally, the actors were aging out of their roles. However, in 2019, when Disney bought 20th Century Fox, this included the rights to the Percy Jackson novels. So in 2023, they released the first season of A Percy Jackson and the Olympian Show. And in March of 2025, they greenlit a 3rd season, which is set to finally adapt that 3rd book. Personally, I think TV shows is the best format to adapt book series into.
I heard that show's pretty good.
That sounds like an amazing idea.
Ocean's 8 is set within the Ocean's 11.
So for me, when it comes to Percy Jackson, I've never really been interested in it. I think it's kind of like silly. I'm glad people like it, but it's just not really my taste. But from what I've heard, the TV show is doing pretty good. So that's what I like to hear.
11 universe. No, not that Ocean's 11, the Clooney one. As far as box office and reviews goes, it did okay, making 300 million on a budget of 70. For context, Ocean's 13 made 310 on a budget of 85. Now, Warner Brothers clearly set this up to be the first in a trilogy, so they could have Oceans 9 and 10, but number 9 has had no movement. Like, there's not even a lot of talk about it. Instead, it just looks like they're not going to bother with it for whatever reason. There are, however, 3 other movies in development within the Oceans franchise. One is a prequel set in 1960s Europe starring Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, who would apparently be playing the parents of Danny and Debbie Ocean. George Clooney and Brad Pitt have confirmed that there's an Oceans 14 script, while director of Oceans 11, 12 and 13, Steven Soderbergh, has also spoken about the possibility of making a movie that crosses over with another franchise he directed, that being Magic Mike. So, do I think we'll be getting an Oceans 9? No. Do I think we'll be getting a Magic Mike crossover? No. But I do think we'll be getting either the prequel or Oceans 14, or maybe even both. And perhaps Oceans 14 could feature cameos from the Oceans 8 crew, plus Magic Mike.
Why do you need to do this? Because it's what I'm good at.
Alright, strap in, because The Amazing Spider-Man 2 wasn't
Oceans,
just
it is
for a
what it
third,
is. I don't know.
but a whole cinematic universe set within this world. The Amazing Spider-Man 3 was planned and had a release date slated for June 10, 2016. However, this later got pushed back to 2018 when Sony decided to make a Sinister Six movie first. But not just one movie, the film was set to be a 2-parter, with the first being released on November 11, 2016. Drew Goddard was attached to write and direct this movie, which was said to pick up directly where The Amazing Spider-Man 2 left off. However, there are conflicting reports as to whether Andrew Garfield would be in one part, both parts, or neither. The end credits of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 hinted at the lineup, which would include Vulture, Green Goblin, Doc Ock, Mysterio, Kraven, and Rhino, but apparently this wasn't necessarily going to be the final team. While plot details haven't been confirmed, there were rumoured ideas where Harry Osborn would be leading the team with the goal of destroying humanity and going on a mission to recover an alien meteor, which would later be revealed to be Venom. Osborn wanted the symbiote, but Spider-Man would be the one who unintentionally bonds with it before finding the Sinister Six. Other ideas included Doc Ock betraying the group and going rogue, leading to the remaining 5 battling against him with Spider-Man's assistance. There was also the possibility of having the Sinister Six team being controlled by the government, determining when and where to enlist their services. This is a similar idea to what would end up being used in another 2016 movie. It was even said that the story would have a redemption arc for the characters. Despite this film being set in Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man universe, Drew Goddard has said that the script could be tweaked to work in any universe, whether it be Andrew's, Tom's, or a separate world altogether. So following the Sinister Six 2-parter would be The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Not much is known about the plot, other than some surface level ideas which would focus on Peter coming to terms with Gwen's death. George Stacy actor Dennis Leary said in 2015 that Peter would have developed a formula to bring back people in his life who have died, including Gwen Stacy and Captain Stacy. Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 director Mark Webb also confirmed that he wanted Chris Cooper to return to be the film's main villain. So basically anyone who died in the previous movies would come back to life, except Uncle Ben. There was also talks about having The Amazing Spider-Man 3 be released before the 2-part Sinister Six films. Peter would get the black symbiote costume in The Amazing Spider-Man 3, be wearing it in part 1 of Sinister Six, before being separated from it and latching onto Eddie, becoming Venom in part 2. This would then lead to a Venom spin-off film, so even the spin-offs would be spinning off spin-offs.
Wow.
That 5 times fast. The spin-offs would spin-off, that failed immediately. Black Cat, Silver Sable, Stunner, Firestar, and Spider-Woman were some other characters considered to either lead or team up in a movie set in the Amazing Spider-Man universe. Black Cat makes the most Spidey sense, seeing as though she was introduced in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, played by Felicity Jones. Spider-Man 2099 was planned to be released in late 2017, which was set to be set in 2099 New York, following Miguel O'Hara as Spider-Man going up against the corporation Alchemax. Setting a movie in 2099 would have made it difficult to connect to the Amazing Spider-Man universe, except the idea was to have Morlun as the villain, who travels across the multiverse killing spider variants, so this could be that link to Andrew's world. Now, I'm not sure if this next idea would be the same movie or a different film, but eventually Miguel and Peter's Spider-Man would team up and battle Cletus Cassidy. And finally, back in 2014, there was also talks of a Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield crossover Spider-Man film. It was initially going to have the two characters fighting against each other before teaming up to battle a greater threat. But that's pretty much all the information we have on that. However, if you've seen Spider-Man No Way Home, you'll know that they eventually put the pair together on the big screen, plus another Spider-Man actor named Tom Holland. The underwhelming box office and mixed reviews for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and the partnership deal with Marvel Studios led to all these cancellations and Tom Holland's reboot. Yes, the film made $700 million, but with a budget of around $400 to $500 million, including marketing, it probably only just broke even, because studios don't get all that money from the box office. A significant percentage goes to the movie theaters. Personally, I would love to see the continuation of both Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man universes. People love these versions, and a continuation of either of these would make money at the box office. I think you can have multiple Peter Parker Spider-Man movies running at the same time.
Yeah.
DC seems to be doing the same with Batman, so why not Spidey?
Peter 1, Peter 2, Peter 2, Peter 3. Peter 3.
I would have loved a third Kick-Ass movie to conclude.
I think as far as like the future of the MCU goes, especially after Secret Wars, we're going to see more like solo movies that are in their own universe type of thing. So it doesn't have to be like, hey, this is happening on this side of the world, this is happening on this side of the world, this is happening on this side of the world. It would be like, hey, this is happening in this world, this is happening in this world, this is happening in this world. I think it might be smart to go along that route, so then we can see a Spider-Man 4, or we could see a an Amazing Spider-Man 3, and maybe Blade 4, stuff like that. We could see that potentially in the future if they build up to it. Now, as far as all that information goes, it was clear that Sony was trying to capture that same MCU magic of like the early 2010s, and they just couldn't. So I think we're living in the best timeline where Tom came into the MCU and it's his own universe and everything's fine. It would be interesting to see where we would be at right now if Sony would have continued to pursue that world and Andrew continued being Spider-Man. Interesting concept to consider.
The trilogy. Unfortunately, the box office is once again the reason for that not happening. However, in 2023, the rights to the film went back to director Matthew Vaughn, who intended to continue this franchise, but not with Kick-Ass in the lead, instead focusing on new characters before bringing Kick-Ass and Hit Girl back into the frame once the newbies have been established. This new film is called Stunt Nuts the Movie and is already filmed back in 2023, which is said to be about a group of athletes trying to raise money so their training gym can stay open. The second film, Stunt Nuts Does School Fight, has also filmed, and the third film, Stunt Nuts Does Shiva, which is said to be Jaws meets Groundhog Day, has also been announced along with a fourth movie. So just to recap, 4 films have been confirmed, 2 of them have already filmed, and 0 have been released, nor do we have any details about when that will be. Director Damien Walters was quoted as saying that the movies were trying to give a true representation of the stunt world and the movie world. How this all connects to Kick-Ass, that's unclear. My theory is that it will be similar to how Argyle connected itself to the Kingsman franchise. Speaking of which, Kingsman: The Golden Circle sees Channing Tatum join the London branch.
Yeah, it's interesting, the director of those movies, what he does, and even the comic books they're based off of, what they do is they'll establish this world, these cool characters, and then in the beginning of the next movie, they'll just kill off the character, or they'll push him aside, and we just never see that extra side character again. And I think both Kick-Ass and Kingsman for sure suffered from that. We set up Roxy as a good companion to the main character of Kingsman, and then in the beginning of the second one, she just dies. And everyone else that he's been with just gone. And with Kick-Ass, there's his girlfriend, and then she thinks that he's cheating on her, so she just breaks up with him right in the beginning. This cool character you set up, and she's just nothing in the sequel. It's just they keep doing that, and I think that's actually the type of stuff like that type of narrative backbend to like get a character into a different position. I think that's what ultimately hurts the films going in the future. And so stuff like that is what unfortunately affects those films that much. And so that's why I don't think there's a lot of people clamoring for a Kick-Ass 3 and a Kingsman 3, because that extra investment is just not there anymore. I just think it's one of those things where the writers and the director, they can maybe just try a little harder and make the story better by not just killing off side characters or removing them right off the bat. Like, keep them around, keep the good ones around. That was just the Roxy thing, which is a bad call.
At the end of the movie, and the third film was set to be the final chapter for Hart and Eggsy. Since then, not only have we gotten a prequel that also teased a future,
itchy foot. I think I got bit by a mosquito on my
to
foot.
take place in that same universe. On top of all of this, Kingsman co-creator Mark Millar said a crossover with Hit Girl was also being considered. Financially, the first two Kingsman movies did well, but the prequel and Argyle were box office bombs, and unfortunately the only film out of those that seemed to be positively reviewed was The Secret Service. So when asked about the future of this franchise in October of 2024, 20th Century Studios executive Steve Aspel said that there were no plans on doing any prequels or sequels anytime soon. There was even a TV show in development after The Golden Circle, set to focus on The Statesman, with Channing Tatum, Jeff Bridges, and Halle Berry returning, but that too has taken a back seat. Basically what we've learned from this is that eventually everything Matthew Vaughn has ever produced will be set within one cinematic universe. So I look forward to seeing how Tristan Thorne from Stardust, XXXX from Layer Cake, Rachel Singer from The Dept, and Charles Xavier from X-Men First Class will fit into it.
When you can access all that, you'll possess a power no one can match.
Speaking of X-Men, while the main movies, Wolverine and Deadpool, all seem to have wrapped up their stories, one pocket of the universe that still had more story to tell was the New Mutants. I mean, it doesn't blatantly end on a cliffhanger. Movies have ended this way before, but writer-director Josh Boone said this movie was intended to be the first in a trilogy. When pitching the first film, Boone and co-writer Nate Lee pitched all three, with plans to take inspiration from big events in the comics and include characters like Warlock, Karma, Sunspot's father Emmanuel DaCosta, and already established X-Men characters for the later movies. Boone even intended on each film being a different subgenre of horror, distinct from the first, which was described as a rubber reality supernatural. However, Disney bought 20th Century Fox just before the film's release, ending the sequel's development, and those characters were to be folded into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I understand this movie isn't the most positively reviewed movie of all time, but I was really interested in what they were going for. I'm not a huge fan of horror, but I think it would have been cool to have something really unique and different from the other X-Men movies by going full horror. Unfortunately, I feel like it kind of went half horror, half superhero movie, and it ended up being neither. But that could have been due to the studio wanting to avoid an R rating. It also didn't get an opportunity to have reshoots. A lot of people hear reshoots and think the film is in trouble, but it's just a part of the movie making process. Sometimes it isn't until the editing stage where it's made clear what needs to be done to improve upon the movie. Every major movie has reshoots. The only time you should be worried is when they go on for longer than a month. But even then, the film could still end up being amazing. Rogue One had extensive reshoots, and it ended up being my favourite Star Wars movie of all time.
I've got a bad feeling about it.
Hellboy the Golden Army ends with Hellboy
Yeah,
and Liz
I don't really care about
twins,
the New Mutants,
setting
so
up a
not a
third
big deal.
movie. All involved were keen to return for this third film, and writer-director Guillermo del Toro knew what it would be about. But one of the problems was that this idea would require a budget of around $150 million, only $18 million less than what the Golden Army made at the box office. And there lies the problem. Critically, these del Toro Hellboy films were reviewed well, though financially they were only really making their money back once it came to DVD sales. And with DVD sales no longer a thing, they don't have that to rely on. So years went by and Del Toro made Pacific Rim for Legendary Pictures, who then said that if the sequel did well, they would be willing to seriously consider funding Hellboy 3. Unfortunately, Pacific Rim Uprising was a box office disappointment. So in 2017, nearly a decade after the release of The Golden Army, Del Toro revealed that after exhausting all possibilities, Hellboy 3 would not be happening. This led to an underwhelming financial and critical reboot in 2019, and another underwhelming financial and critical reboot in 2024. Unfortunately, it just seems like the Hellboy franchise doesn't really have a large enough following. While there is definitely a cult following towards the character and Guillermo del Toro's version, I sadly don't think it's big enough for us to continue getting Hellboy movies in the future.
See,
I don't like that.
Yeah.
Now, I just briefly mentioned the Pacific Rim franchise, but this also set up a third movie when Uprising ended with Newt indicating precursors will return. Not only was the idea for the next movie mapped out, but also plans for future sequels, spin-offs, and hopes to make a crossover with the Monsterverse. Financially, the numbers of Uprising didn't justify the continuation of the Pacific Rim franchise on the big screen, but it did get a 2-season anime in 2021, which acts as a continuation of the movies. In 2024, Legendary Pictures also announced that a live-action show was in development that would be a prequel to the first film, and looks likely to happen because as recently as April of 2025, Amazon came on board to distribute the series on their streaming service.
Okay.
And who knows, if this does well, maybe it will lead to a live-action continuation of the Pacific Rim story back on the big screen.
We're gonna keep coming!
Before Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer was released, 20th Century Fox had already scheduled a 2009 release date for a third film, which was said to include The Puppet Master and Black Panther. Unfortunately, despite Rise of the Silver Surfer being profitable, the box office numbers didn't justify a third film, particularly with the first two being reviewed negatively. On top of this, Michael Chiklis was the only one interested in returning. However, while making that second movie, there was also the idea to spin off events of that film, starring the Silver Surfer, when Norrin Radd returns to his home planet Zen-La to learn about his past and powers. Director Tim Story said the movie was going to feature a more comic-accurate looking Galactus, but was cancelled at the same time as the third Fantastic Four movie. And for those who don't think this movie blatantly set up a sequel or spin-off, you must have missed the mid-credit scene. To be fair, Rise of the Silver Surfer was released in 2007, before mid and post-credit scenes became mainstream.
It's over. Go home.
Yeah, I'm good.
Independence Day
I like those
resurgence
two.
of the
They're fine.
resurgence looks
They're fine.
unlikely to happen, even after the second film set up the building of a resistance to attack the Harvester's homeworld. After making nearly $400 million on a budget of $165, it doesn't seem out of the question that a third film could happen, but seeing as though the franchise is now in the hands of Disney after the Fox merger, they may not see the value in continuing something where the last entry was reviewed poorly. Although, as recently as 2024, director Roland Emmerich has revealed that the story has been written, which is said to be an intergalactic mission.
We are gonna kick some serious alien.
Alright, let's talk about the DCEU. The 20...
Yeah, I remember that Independence Day 2. They talk about how like everyone thinks that his dad died, but no body was found. So I always theorized that like Will Smith's character, because he couldn't show up for that movie, like due to scheduling with, I think it was Suicide Squad at the time, he couldn't be in it. They just kind of wrote it like, oh, he got teleported or something, so he's in a different, area or something. He's still alive, but the people in universe don't know he's still alive. So that's where the third movie would take place, which I think could be cool. The first one is a classic, and that second one was kind of rough. It had its moments, but it was pretty rough. So I'm okay if they don't do a third one, but I'd be cool if they wanted to do one final one to kind of send the franchise out. I'd be okay with that.
The 11 Green Lantern movie was intended to be the start of the DC Comics cinematic universe, but after the financial and critical disappointment, Warner Brothers decided to immediately start again with 2013's Man of Steel. Over the next decade, we got 15 movies, a different version of one of those movies, plus a TV show, which is also connected to the new universe. Unfortunately for fans of this franchise, it's pretty obvious as to why it was rebooted. Most of the films were mixed to negatively reviewed, and because of this, the box office suffered. Only 5 of the DCEU films are certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, which is why Aquaman was the only one to make over $1 billion at the box office. After Aquaman's box office success, the next 9 movies only made an average of $253 million on an average budget of $155 million each. Wonder Woman 1984 and 2021's The Suicide Squad were COVID-impacted films, but I doubt either of those would have done amazing numbers due to the previous entries in the cinematic universe. Generally speaking, in order for a film to break even financially, it needs to make at least twice the budget. So those 9 movies released between 2019 and 2023 would have lost Warner Brothers in total an estimated $500 million dues. On top of this, there were about 700 movies announced that never got made, a Batgirl movie that was filmed but never released, a Batman film set in a different universe, alternate world Joker films, TV shows set in all sorts of universes, and controversies surrounding actors. Therefore, starting fresh seemed like the best option. And how did they do this? With new management. When Warner Brothers and Discovery merged together in April of 2022, CEO David Zaslav was looking for someone to oversee the DC universe in the same way Kevin Feige oversees the Marvel universe. By October of that year, it was decided that instead of one person, it would be two, those being James Gunn and Peter Safran. Essentially, Gunn would focus more on the creative side of things, while Safran took care of the business and production aspects. The pair worked with a group of writers to develop an 8 to 10 year plan, starting with 2025 Superman starring David Corenswet instead of Henry Cavill, to let audiences know this is a reboot. So due to this reboot, it means that the Deathstroke villain team, Apocalyptic Future, Mr. Mind, Superman vs. Black Adam, and Ted Kore's Blue Beetle tease will remain unanswered. Unless they do multiverse or say Blue Beetle and Shazam are set in the new DCU and tell people not to worry about continuity, like Peacemaker.
Have you guys ever thought about doing a rebranding of sorts?
The Chronicles of Narnia is one of the
Okay, so this might be a hot take, but I think that what they should have done, they should have let Snyder finish his vision. They should have let him do the Justice League Part 2 and 3 like he originally planned. And then they reboot. I think that was a big hindrance to the fandom. I think a lot of people were jaded because they were super excited about Zack coming back to the universe and kind of finishing his vision. And of course, Zack Snyder's Justice League was really, really good. So people want to see more of that, but they're not going to get more of that. And in fact, they're going to get it replaced by something else. And I think that also hurt Gunn. So what they should have did was let Zack finish his vision, finish both 2 and 3, finish off the world, give that a nice send-off, and now we can reboot. I think that not just fans would be happier and be less jaded, but then people would also be able to say goodbye to Zack and, you know, more be willing to welcome James Gunn into the fold. So that was a big mistake by WB for sure.
Best-selling book franchises of all time with 7 novels in the series, but only the first 3 have movies. In 2016, a script for The Silver Chair was being written, but despite Pete, Sue, Ed and Lou not being in this film, the decision was made to reboot the series with a new cast. It's unclear as to why, but I would imagine it had something to do with it being 6 years since The Voyage of the Dawn Treader and 11 years since The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, so it would probably end up being an additional 2 years before The Silver Chair was actually released, meaning the original audience had probably lost interest, so the studio was looking to target the next generation. Captain America the First Avenger director, Joe Johnston, was hired to direct in 2017, but that was the last we heard about the project. The next time news about the Chronicles of Narnia came was in October of 2018, when it was announced the C.S. Lewis Company had agreed to a multi-year deal with Netflix to adapt those novels into movies and TV shows, effectively cancelling that Silverchair iteration. Despite the deal happening in 2018, it wasn't until 2025 when filming actually began on a movie. That first film is going to be The Magician's Nephew, which is the 6th book. The screenplay is written and directed by Greta Gerwig and is scheduled for release on November 26, 2026.
I think it works good as a trilogy. I don't think it needed any more of the
Mysterious
books.
Island ends with Alexander giving his grand...
Especially if you consider that, you know, if you look at the original Chronicles of Narnia books, after the 3rd book, the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the original cast is gone. So I'm okay with that if they want to just move on from there, or just reboot it and do the TV show. TV show could be good, so we'll see what they got then.
Grandson, the next book to be adapted into a movie, From the Earth to the Moon. In 2014, 2 years after The Mysterious Island was released, things were moving forward on the 3rd entry, with Rock the Dwayne Johnson set to return for 2 more movies. However, by 2018, progress had stalled due to it being so long since the previous, assuming those who enjoyed the first 2 had lost interest in the franchise. I'd be surprised if we never got another movie based off the Voyager's Extraordinary series, as there are 61 novels and 10 short stories. Having said that, I would be surprised if it's connected to the previous 2, unless they put Fraser and Johnson together. That might bring audiences back.
You've got to do this.
The Scorpion
Dr.
King,
Baxter Stockman.
the Scorpion King and Brendan Fraser's character from Mummy coming together. I never watched those movies, but I would rewatch those 2 movies to get ready for a 3rd one if I knew The Rock and Brendan Fraser were going to be together in a movie. I would do that. Like, the same thing I heard of. There's rumors that they might be doing a Mummy 4 with Brendan Fraser. I'll be there. Love him.
Is still around at the end of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows, and Tyler Perry had signed on for 3 films, presumably transforming into his mutant fly form in one of them. When it comes to non-IP, studios like to sign actors up to multi-film deals. That doesn't necessarily mean there are going to be that many, but it's always assumed these things turn into a franchise. So not only was Tyler Perry signed on for more, but Megan Fox and the Turtle actors had also agreed to be a part of at least a trilogy. However, due to reasons similar to why all franchises end, box office and reviews, this iteration of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles ended after 2. It did get an animated reboot in 2023, and a live-action reboot was in development in 2021, with Colin and Casey Jost writing the script. I initially thought the latter would have faded away due to Mutant Mayhem, but the live-action announcement came while the animation was also happening. So it could be a situation like Spider-Man, where we have animated and live-action movies happening simultaneously.
Turtle power!
That'd be okay.
Now, I only spoke about franchises that have 2 or more movies, because I've already made a video about films that set up a second film, but never happened, which you can check out in the playlist, along with other cancelled movies.
We're going to check that video out
thanks
then.
for watching. Let me know in the comments which of these series you wish kept going.
Very solid video. When it comes to the live action Michael Bay Mutant Ninja Turtles, they were fine. I could have used a third one, but I'm actually okay with that. What I really want to see is Michael Bay come back to the Transformers franchise. I think it's time. I remember feeling very fatigued by those movies, but I'm ready for more fun, just turn off brain action movies, and we just don't really get those as much anymore, so I want to see more of those. But what's your personal opinion? Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn notifications for more videos. If you want to check out any more of my videos, go ahead and click these links right here. I appreciate it. But that's it for now, guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.